Welcome to the latest edition of the Daily Knockdown. I am Michael Daly, and on this edition of the show, we're going to start off by talking about Vergil Ortiz Jr.'s ninth round finish of Michael McKinson last Saturday at the Dickies Arena in Texas. That was an impressive showing from Vergil Ortiz. He extended his knockout streak, and now he put himself on the map. That is exactly where Vergil Ortiz is at this moment in time. He is on every single welterweight champion's radar. Now, who are those welterweight champions? Right now, it's just two of them, aside from the regular WBA champion, Imanatis Stanionis. But those two, Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence Jr., they are well aware of Vergil Ortiz. So much so that Terrence Crawford was even in the audience for Vergil Ortiz's win that night on Saturday. I think he was very complimentary of Vergil Ortiz, as he should have been. Vergil Ortiz put on a great showing. He walked down McKinson. McKinson is not a fighter with a lot of power. The only way he was ever going to beat Vergil Ortiz was with his feet, by moving outside, creating distance. He just wasn't able to do that because he was getting walked down the entire time. He was getting hit with way too many power shots from Vergil Ortiz. And Vergil Ortiz just showed that any speed bump you try to throw in his way, he's going to roll right over it because he is that legitimate. Vergil Ortiz, I would say, is the best fighter in Golden Boy's stable right now. In their promotional stable, he is the very best. He's better than Ryan Garcia. Canelo Alvarez is no longer there, so you don't really have to factor him in anymore. Vergil Ortiz is Golden Boy's guy. He is the guy, and they need to treat him as such. And I think they're doing that. So good on Golden Boy for that. The fights moving forward after the McKinson win, they have to progressively get bigger and bigger. Now, will Vergil Ortiz fight a champion in his next go-around? I don't think so. Do I think he's ready yet? I would say he is ready, especially if you're comparing him to other guys who have received title shots. But if you're trying to build him into someone who is a future champion, I think it's fine to let the maturation process continue. I don't see any problem with that. You do have to build up from fighting someone like McKinson, because McKinson in the British circuit was a well-respected British champion, a European champion. Now you have to build on that. Who will he fight? I do think there is one guy out there who he could fight that technically is a champion, and I mentioned him a little while ago. That is Imanatis Stanionis. That would be a solid fight, and it would work because Vergil Ortiz is in the WBA sanctioning body. He's the number one contender in the WBA and the WBO. Granted, Golden Boy, PBC, and any other promotion, they would have to iron out the contracts and how that fight would work. But if we're solely talking about a sanctioning body and being in that sanctioning body, it would work with the WBA. And let's be honest here. As good of a fighter as Imanatis Stanionis is, he's not Terrence Crawford and he's not Errol Spence Jr. That will be a nice test for Vergil Ortiz, but it's a winnable fight for him as well. And if you're Golden Boy, I think it would behoove you to do everything you can from a promotional standpoint and a contractual standpoint to get that fight done if you want your guy, Vergil Ortiz, at 24 years old, to fight for a world title right now. Will he be the primary WBA champion? No, but he'll still be a champion because he'll have that WBA regular title on his resume. So if that's what Golden Boy wants, then I think they need to go for that right now, because Vergil Ortiz is becoming a star. You do need to be careful with who you shop him around, because if you try to have him fight someone like Jaron Boots Ennis in a rising contenders match and see who's going to be a future world champion, I don't think that is the fight for him right now. I'm not saying he can't win that fight, but I don't think that's the fight for him. It's too risky right now, especially because Vergil Ortiz does not have a world title and he needs one to take a fight like that. But fighting Imanatis Stanionis, oh yeah, that's a winnable fight. Stanionis is no slouch, by the way. There's a reason why he is the WBA regular champion. he's that good. But I do think that is a winnable fight for him. Some other names, Jamal James, he's out there. There are fights in the 147-pound division for Vergil Ortiz. It just depends on what Golden Boy wants to give him. I would not be upset if they try to line him up with Iman Stanionis. I think it might be just a little too soon for him to fight Terrence Bud Crawford. But again, it would work because Terrence Bud Crawford is the WBO champ, and he is the #1 contender. Same thing goes with Errol Spence Jr. Errol Spence Jr. is the WBA champion, and obviously Vergil Ortiz is the #1 contender in both of those sanctioning bodies, the WBO and the WBA. Right now, I think the fight Golden Boy really wants for Vergil Ortiz is against Errol Spence. They wouldn't mind Terrence Crawford, but the Texas part of it would blow that fight up because Vergil Ortiz is from Texas. Errol Spence Jr. is also from Texas. That fight would most likely take place at the Cowboys Stadium in Arlington, Texas. That would be a massive fight. Maybe not in terms of pay-per-view, but in terms of the live gate, meaning fans who are attending and showing up. Man, that would be a great fight to happen. Is it a little bit too soon for Vergil Ortiz? It could be, but he does have the skills to test those guys, and he would give them a good test, whether it's Crawford or Spence. So it is definitely interesting to see what will be next for Vergil Ortiz Jr. Another fight that happened this past weekend, Michael Mick Conlan defeated Miguel Marriaga in Europe, in Belfast, via unanimous decision. This was the win that Michael Conlan needed. He needed this win. No other way to put it. After getting knocked out by Lee Wood in March, you got to win your next fight. That comeback fight, you have to handle your business, especially against a guy like Miguel Marriaga, who, by all accounts, is a seasoned veteran, a seasoned pro, well-respected, but he's a beatable opponent at 126 pounds. Michael Conlan just showed by knocking Miguel Marriaga down 3 times, he was able to cruise to a unanimous decision victory. This was the right fight for him. He displayed his boxing skills, showed off his power, had that home crowd energy, used it to his advantage, and it worked out. Miguel Marriaga went into enemy territory and just couldn't do it against the better fighter. Michael Conlan proved why he was the better fighter. And Michael Conlan is also out to prove that his loss to Lee Wood was a one-off. His loss to Lee Wood was an anomaly. Do I think it was an anomaly? I'm not going to say it was, because Lee Wood is a very, very talented fighter in the 126-pound division. Would I like to see Lee Wood give Michael Conlan another crack at the belt? I would. I think that would be a very good fight, a rematch, because Michael Conlan was holding his own in that fight before he was stopped. It was a competitive fight. It just got away from him, and he couldn't make up for it. It was over before he knew it. Another chance at that, I think that would be very good for Michael Conlan. Another option for Michael Conlan, what if he fights the WBO champion in the 126-pound division, Emmanuel Navarrete, if Emmanuel Navarrete is able to handle his business in San Diego on August 20th. I could see that being a very nice fight because both fighters compete on ESPN in the United States. I think contractually and from a promotional standpoint, that is a doable fight. That fight could happen. Emmanuel Navarrete would give Michael Conlan a very tough challenge, but Michael Conlan, I think, is trying to grow his base. So if he's able to fight over in the U.S. again and come back here and get a convincing win over someone like Emmanuel Navarrete, that's exactly what he needs if he's not able to get a rematch with Lee Wood. Right now, those are the two champions, Lee Wood, Emmanuel Navarrete, who I could see Michael Conlan fighting next. The timetable works out perfectly for him to fight Emmanuel Navarrete. Michael Conlan fought early August. Emmanuel Navarrete is fighting August 20th, like I just mentioned. It would work out. if the two want to make it happen, and I think they should. That would be a nice fight. There is one fight that was scrapped, but the main draw, the A side of this fight, the fighter will continue to fight on August 27th. Who is that? That is KSI. Yes, KSI. We're going to be talking about that. He was scheduled to fight Alex Wasabi in England, in London, on August 27th. That fight was canceled because Alex Wasabi suffered a concussion in sparring. He wasn't able to continue. There were even talks of Jake Paul throwing his hat in the ring because him and KSI, their hatred runs deep. They want to fight each other. Jake Paul said, look, my fight against Hakeem Rockman Jr. on August 6th, that was canceled. I don't have an opponent. I'm willing to drop down 20 pounds in weight to fight you, meet you at 180 pounds. I'm even willing to make you the A side and fight you in your own backyard to prove that I'm the better fighter. KSI, which I think was the right thing to do and the smart thing, opted not to accept Jake Paul's offer. And he went ahead and fought and is going to fight Swarms on August 27th. I don't know much about Swarms. I don't think too many people know too much about Swarms. KSI should win that fight handily. I expect him to get a stoppage in that fight. But KSI needs a tune-up fight before he ever considers fighting Jake Paul. Before he even thinks about fighting Jake Paul, he needs a warm-up fight. And he's going to get that with Swarms. I expect him, like I said, to beat Swarms convincingly, whether it is by decision. I personally think he's going to stop Swarms because if you have seen KSI's training and his sparring, he's looking good. KSI is looking good. He's looking prepared, but not prepared enough to fight Jake Paul just yet. I think he needs to go through with this training camp. And then in the spring or maybe in the winter, if he wants to fight Jake Paul, go ahead, do that. KSI was talking about fighting Jake Paul at Wembley Stadium or some other soccer stadium in England. That would be massive. I don't know if Jake Paul would agree to fighting KSI in England, but if that ever happens at Wembley Stadium, there's a very good chance that could be one of the biggest gates in Wembley Stadium history for a boxing match. Who wouldn't be interested in that? You have KSI, who, if he's able to get past Swarms, showing that he is in boxing shape and boxing condition. And then obviously you have Jake Paul, who is taking the sport very seriously at this moment in time. Have them meet. The internet would be destroyed with the amount of traffic that fight would cause. That would be a great fight for the internet and for the boxing community. Jake Paul, I consider him to be a legitimate boxer right now. And KSI has taken the sport very seriously since 2018. Line them up, have them fight in 2023. That would be a great fight for the sport of boxing and for those two guys as well. Have them settle their difference in the ring. And our last topic for this show today, we have a good one. Teofimo Lopez on Saturday will be taking on Pedro Campa in Las Vegas. Pedro Campa, he is a true 140-pound fighter. He will be introducing Teofimo Lopez to the super lightweight division. This is the fight that Teofimo Lopez needs because Teofimo is too big for the 135-pound division. He just is too big. And he has a lot of power for that division, but it's time for him to move on. Once he lost to George Kambosos, he pretty much knew that the right weight for him was no longer at 135 pounds. It was 140 pounds. So Saturday, if he's able to get past and beat Pedro Campa, now you could start talking about Teofimo Lopez being someone who can fight for a world title at 140 pounds. That's what he wants. That is exactly what Teofimo Lopez wants because he wants to prove that he can be a multiple division champion. And he also wants a lot of other fighters who may have fought at 135 pounds to move up and fight him because he is the main attraction in that division. And where Teofimo Lopez is at, if he is able to beat Pedro Campa, you can line up Josh Kelly, depending on what Josh Kelly decides to do, or Josh Taylor rather, what Josh Taylor decides to do with his next fight, whether he goes for a rematch or he decides to say, you know what, I like Teofimo Lopez, let me give him an opportunity. There are big fights out there for Teofimo Lopez. Being under top rank, he can make a fight with Josh Taylor happen. That can definitely happen. And I believe that would be a good fight. You have Jose Ramirez. He's out there in the future. I think that would be a nice fight for Teofimo Lopez. That would garner a lot of views, whether it's on ESPN Plus or ESPN. A lot of people would tune into that fight because Jose Ramirez, a former champion, has a big name. Teofimo Lopez has 12 knockouts heading into the Campa fight on his record. He's a big puncher. Teofimo Lopez will carry his weight to the 140-pound division, and I see him being a future champion in that division. He is going to get a TKO victory over Pedro Campa. It'll be a nice test for him, but he will ingratiate himself in that division, and eventually he will fight someone like either Josh Taylor or Jose Ramirez. That's exactly where he needs to be in that division. Teofimo Lopez, his career has been handled nicely up until this point. Obviously, the Kambosos fight, it was delayed several times. It should have happened in June and even August of 2021. That fight did not happen when it was supposed to. It happened right around Thanksgiving 2021. And I just don't think Teofimo Lopez was fully focused on George Kambosos as an opponent. But now, with a new outlook in boxing, he's ready. Teofimo Lopez is ready to be a world champion once again. Sign him up. Give him the biggest fights there are to give in that division. Teofimo Lopez is not going anywhere, and I think he's going to be a world champion one day in the 140-pound division. That will do it for the latest edition of the Daily Knockdown. I am your host, Michael Daly, saying so long, take care, make sure you like and subscribe.